the information that they need in their day-to-day activities. Father, we know that we are starting with you, and we'd like to ask for your favor that you hand with us. We ask all this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Bearing in mind that we should not gloss over the funeral, we have a funeral that is going on, and I think we as members of parliament are very much involved in that funeral. And at this point, I would just like to ask that we just observe this being the first presser we are having as members of parliament. We have not had a presser. We would like to observe a moment of silence. Thereafter, we ask the people that are prepared to start the presser. I ask for a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Who's starting? You are starting. Okay. We have different issues that occurred in the week. As you know that our pressers are structured around reflecting on different issues that occurred inside Parliament and those that may concern the members of the public, as it may be. And we will range from issues to do with the Constitution. We range with the issues to do with economy, its performance of the economy. We also range to do with issues that touch on social justice, as well as factors that are related to such issues. At this point in time, I would like to ask Honorable Kafwaya to start up with the issue that relates to a number of things. And I think you drove into the issues of budget, also on the issues of the elephant in the room, which is Bill 7, sorry. I'm used to Bill 10, and other related issues. Honorable Kafwaya, sir.
Thank you so much, Honorable Fube. I would like to appreciate the opportunity offered to me. Let me recognize senior members of the party and also senior members in the House and all members of Parliament who are here today. I also recognize the media, as I do our viewers. I have a few things to talk about. I'd like to start by recognizing that yesterday I saw on social media that the President appointed a Deputy Auditor General. I'd like to congratulate the appointee. I recall that 2 deputies there were removed from office and sent to holding position. Eventually, one of them died. Clara Mbazima died. So I don't know which position was filled by the President. I'm not very sure. But one Deputy Auditor General has been appointed to fill one of those positions. Congratulations to the appointee. What I'm still wondering is why the Auditor General cannot be appointed. I'm wondering whether the President has failed to identify talent which can be able to perform the functions of Auditor General. From the time Dr. Dix Jembe was forced to resign, up to now, there has been no Auditor General in the country. And you can't keep the audit office without the Auditor General. I think the President should find a way of appointing the Auditor General. He has kept that office without the head for too long. And by the way, the man who is there does not even qualify to act, because according to the law, you cannot act in a position in which you don't qualify. So we don't want to belabor the fact that the acting Auditor General does not qualify, to act. This morning, as I listened to Her Honor the Vice President responding to some of the questions that were put to her by some members, I was very surprised to observe that UPND think that they have made things easier for people. They think that millimil is cheap now. You know, they think that the cost of Forex is now cheap. In fact, even the president commented on that, where he even said if he wasn't sitting as president, he would be praising UPND. I'm very surprised that the UPND government think that the tax system of this country is now fair. You won't believe it. They think it is fair. This is when UPND is trying to tax the poor people more than ever. Remember how we complained about you know, the mobile money taxation. UPND went ahead and introduced that tax. Right now they are saying even those who sell cigarettes will be taxed more. Those people who sell, you know, beer will be taxed more. Those people, it's just chaotic. Now, they are focusing on just the poor people. And remember, this government is a government that only focuses on damaging poor people. If you recall what they did to mobile money you know, traders, you know, their booths were just destroyed without notice, and the government has moved on. Now they are going back to, it's chaotic. But with all that, the UPND government think that they have done so well, you know. Today, so I got a little frustrated, and I decided to remind them that you are the same government who fed people with imported millimil which had aflatoxins. Basically poisoned millimil. But the UPND considers that as you know, food security. They are the same ones who exported safe maize, which they found in sheds. UPND considers that as you know, food security. So the more they look at their success, you know, the more I get surprised. When I look at what the president has been commissioning, all of the work is for the late President Edgar Lungu. Recently, he commissioned a dam in Kafulafuta. 84% of the work was done by President Edgar Lungu. But when you listen to the ministers, the way they talk, you are really left to wonder, you know, what type of people these ones are. The power plant, which was you know, launched, no mention of Edgar Lungu whatsoever. I wonder what the honoring of the dead body is about. But let me remind you, my friends, that this is the same UPND government which facilitated $2.8 billion worth of illicit financial flows. This is the same government which facilitated 60 billion kwacha worth of illicit financial flows. They facilitated 34.5 billion kwacha worth of illicit financial flows. Now, when you look at these numbers, of corruption, of theft, can UPND on any day have any morality to stand up and start misleading Zambian people that they have worked? This is why you see they are so hell-bent on destroying the Patriotic Front. The Vice President today considered the illegal actions of the Registrar of Society as opposition. She said what is happening is politics. Now, you take politics into the Registrar of Societies. This is how UPND has sunk this country. It is the Vice President who said that today, that no, what is happening at Registrar of Societies is actually politics. How can you take politics into civil service? It's very unfortunate. Maybe it is politics that is happening at Auditor General. That's what we cannot have a legal, a constitutional Auditor General. Look, over 400 people are still in holding position. Some of them, like Clara Mbazima, are even dying because they can't stand getting paid without rendering a service to the people. You have kept these people for all this long without deploying them, and you are calling that performance. You are even saying there's this thing which has come, which they are saying Kwenyu, as if there's something they are trying to promote. It's very, very unfortunate when I look at where this country is going. Look at the supplementary budget. Today, the minister is pushing the approval of a supplementary budget. Okay? 44% of the income is actually borrowing. He wants to borrow, and is not borrowing concessional. He's borrowing at 13%. And this is against the agreement they have with the IMF. The only thing is he's going to borrow in Zambia, and he's going to borrow in dollars. You understand? Which is equivalent to a Eurobond. Because as you know, the Eurobond is any amount borrowed. For our perspective in Zambia, it's any amount, any borrowing done in a currency other than the kwacha. That's a Eurobond. So this guy is going to borrow at 13%. And this particular borrowing will have no grace period. He borrows today, next year he starts paying. Then you will be saying, PF left a lot of debt. This is why we can't plan properly. This is why we can even call Parliament when they are on recess to come and approve a borrowing. It's very, very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. The concessions that they have agreed with IMF is borrow concessional, borrow long, and then get grace periods, and make sure that this borrowing is with very minimal, very minimal, interest. But 13%, none of the PF Eurobonds carried such a high percentage. None. All the 3 Eurobonds are lower than this. But this is a government which was saying, no, if we get to Aisa, there will be no borrowing whatsoever. So for me, I have to tell you, my friends, that I'm very disappointed with the UPND government as far as what they think, how they think they have performed is concerned. I'll speak a little about the specific numbers on the income side of their supplementary budget. But let me just say that I'm also disappointed with the President of the Republic of Zambia for the manner in which he has treated Bill 7. Here is why I am disappointed with him. When he realized that his government had not sufficiently consulted, he directed his minister to defer the bill. See, he realized his government had not consulted, so that was a flawed bill. It was a bill not born out of consensus from the Zambian people. He directed, go and defer the bill. And the minister, I would imagine, intimated with the National Assembly to defer the bill. And the bill, as I speak now, stands deferred. That means within a period of 6 months, that bill will come back. But listen, when this same bill was declared unconstitutional by the Constitutional Court, the president has not directed his minister to go and withdraw. Because now, it's not only the case of failure on the part of government to consult. It is now unconstitutional. The bill now, we are told, is illegal, it is unconstitutional, it can't proceed, but the president has remained mute. He has failed to direct his minister to go and withdraw the bill. For that, I'm very, very disappointed. I think the president should not be swinging into action on smaller issues and leaving big issues, because the Constitution is the biggest document in this land. And what is declared unconstitutional, the president should swing into action. He must have, more velocity than when dealing with the other broken laws, which are subsidiary laws. The president swore to defend the Constitution. He didn't even swear to defend, these other acts of parliament and bylaws and so on. He swore to defend the Constitution. Why is he failing to tell his minister to swing into action and withdraw this bill because it is now illegal. UPND wants to bring back the bill to the floor of the House, even when they know that there is no consultation that they are going to do, even though they know that the bill is an illegal bill, unconstitutional bill. I urge the president to swing into action. Let him demonstrate the same level in fact, a higher level of agency to ensure that this bill is completely out of the parliamentary process. But outside of the president motivating the minister to withdraw the bill, I think the National Assembly of Zambia should not tolerate illegal things. It's very unfortunate. In the executive, they are doing illegal things every day. They have an illegal auditor, they have illegal audit reports, they are now sitting with a bill which is illegal, which they can't withdraw. Now, if the National Assembly tolerate, because people would be thinking, when a matter goes to the National Assembly is going to act. There is no action there. The bill still stands deferred, and the select committee is in place. They are just hibernating. So I think that there is need for the Zambian people to know that these matters, as important as they are, government, both in the executive and the National Assembly, think that to sustain an illegal transaction is normal. I wouldn't be part of that. Let me just briefly talk about how the Minister of Finance wishes to raise revenue to fund the supplementary budget. If you observed, the minister is saying he wants a supplementary budget of 33.6 billion kwacha. Now, when you add all the heads which he has supplemented, the total you are going to get is 25 billion. So 25 billion and 33.6 billion are not the same. So this supplementary budget is not balancing. This is a government document from the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance has brought to the National Assembly a budget which is not balancing, just basically looking at the left and the right, or the debit and the credit. Now, this government is capable of bringing such documents, even for enactment. But you see, the enactment of this will follow a simple majority. So I can assure you, UPND is going to go ahead and enact a budget which is not balancing. That is not the only problem. On the income side, on the revenue side, the minister has got a number there, which is saying savings declared across heads of expenditure, 10.99 billion kwacha. Okay? This is just ubufi, just cheating people, I can assure you, misleading the nation. Because when you pass a budget, you actually come up with a law called an Appropriation Act. And that Appropriation Act will run from 1st January of a relevant year to 31st December of that particular year. So we have an Appropriation Act for 2025, which is the budget for 2025. This amount is sitting in that law. This amount of 10.99 billion is sitting in that law. But what Minister of Finance through Dr. Musokotwane is doing is to come and enact it again, because this process will end up with a Supplementary Appropriation Act. So we're going to have two pieces of legislation: the original Appropriation Act and the Supplementary Act, both of them having a figure of 10.99 billion kwacha. How can you have a budget like that? Now, in accounting, we used to call this double counting. But you double count for what? Now, this can confirm to you that it can justify why the sum of all the supplemented heads is not reaching 33 billion. It is just 25 billion. It can tell you how UPND wants to cheat people. But some of us were trained for this. When I look at this, I summarize, I cast. When I did that, I found that this side of, or the debit side of the supplementary budget is not the same as the credit side. But Dr. Msokotwane will go ahead, can assure you, because we are dealing with a shameless UPND. One more thing I just want to talk about, additional revenues. Now, out of this 33 billion, he's saying 10.9 billion, these are declared savings I was talking about. If you have things which should not exist, it doesn't even a schedule of this figure, it doesn't have. You know, to tabulate what are those heads where you have declared the saving before the year comes to an end. It doesn't have. The next one is financing by borrowing, 14.8 billion kwacha. I talked about how he's going to borrow commercial, 13%, 7 years, and no grace period, which is non-concessional, in contravention with their own agreement with IMF. The last item I want to talk about is the additional revenues through these, where are those bills? I had the bills. Just misplaced them or lost them. So the minister wants to increase taxes for cigarettes, for beer, for betting, and the drinks. You know, the sugar drinks, where the drinks with sugar, Coca-Colas, Mojos, and so on and so forth. So for us, we are saying, you are being unfair to small people, because you can't increase taxation for those who are just drinking beer because they are jobless and they want to forget about some of the things. Yesterday I had a conversation somewhere and somebody said, no, when they increase the cost of beer, people will stop drinking beer. So you, Kafwaya, you want people to continue drinking beer. My response to that colleague of mine was that, look, chakolwa ni chakolwa. What you do to a drunkard is you have to rehabilitate them. You have to help them to come out of that habit of overdrinking. But I also know people who just drink a bit for socialization. And I even declared that for me, I don't drink. I don't even smoke. So I have no personal interest. But I have an interest in people who are doing business, who are doing small businesses in these areas. You can't increase their taxation at the time when you are stealing. Look at the illicit financial flows I was talking about. You can't increase taxation for these small people at a time when you are stealing not only through these illicit financial flows, but also stealing, natural resources like mukula, lithium, sujilite. You can't do that. Gold and everything that you can get revenue from, you steal as a government. You are stealing now, even through an airport. Not ordinary Kurioko Tuya for where we go and are checking in. No, presidential pavilion. God. Presidential pavilion Kurioko some designated place. For it's very unfortunate. Designation but for worship with a dead body. You can't do that. You can't. So what I'm saying is, you have to make sure that you focus on things that can help people and reduce the pain of the Zambian people, particularly those who are defenseless, the vulnerable poor people. Reduce their pain. You can't be increasing their pain like this. Taxes. Otherwise, I would like to end here and perhaps hope that UPND will listen.
Thank you so much, Honorable Kafwaya, for that mouthful assault on different issues. I hope that when I call it assault, you will not be cited for seditious, because it's not an assault on anyone, but you are just trying to tabulate issues. At this moment,
this platform of communicating matters of grave concern in the nation to the public for them to know where we are moving. As introduced, I'm going to speak mainly about the Constitution, but I want to preface my discussion by just making an observation on what happened in the House day before yesterday, on the occasion where the Speaker chose to spite the members of the opposition the time they walked out to go and canvass when the issue of leader of opposition was brought to our attention, and it received a very negative response when, in keeping with the Constitution, she ought to have assisted guiding the House on what was going to happen. If the public was following, the Patriotic Front had communicated previously to the Speaker that we had agreed in compliance with Article 74(2) of the Republican Constitution to have Mr. Miles Sampa take the role of leader of opposition. That decision was arrived at as part of the overall reorganization that we were making in the party, as we ready ourselves to prepare the party as the leading party in Tonse Alliance to go to the 2026 elections. And despite that communication, the presiding officers have not effected the changes on the leader of opposition, choosing unilaterally to keep Mr. Chavinga, as leader of opposition. The Patriotic Front is on record as having said right from the beginning that Mr. Chavinga's ascendancy to the office of leader of opposition, even if it was done in connivance with Mr. Miles Sampa, was not compliant with the Constitution, because Article 74(2) clearly states that the party with the second largest number of members of parliament in parliament should be the one to designate through a process a person they would like to be leader of the opposition. At the time that we had arrived in this parliament, Mr. Brian Mundubile was leader of opposition. Mr. Stephen Kampiongo was the whip for the opposition. They were unceremoniously removed because of a scheme that was hatched and that was even supported by the UPND, which scuttled the leadership of the Patriotic Front on the 23rd of October 2023. Despite that happening, we thought we could ameliorate. As we have been dating the state and explaining our position, we have tried every legal means of trying to reorganize the political party, but we have not received any responses from the judicature. So we felt that as people who are reasonable, we felt that as people that can speak to each other, we can reorganize or we can address our grievances without having recourse to the court. And this is why the settlement between the Miles Sampa faction, if you call it a faction, although I don't even call it a faction myself, and the main group of the Patriotic Front agreed that we are people that reason. We are people that think we can resolve these matters, and we resolved them. Why we are still sitting with Mr. Chavinga as leader of opposition, it is only the presiding officers and the UPND that know. Because under the Constitution, it is the PF which is supposed to designate to the presiding officers who the leader of the opposition is. And shockingly, when we were walking out of the House just to go and canvass, which is in accordance with parliamentary procedure, you could hear the Speaker show her or exhibit her open bias towards the Patriotic Front by saying that the confusion that reigns in your party is the one you are trying to bring to Parliament. Now, for us, it didn't surprise us, because we know who are the authors of confusion in the Patriotic Front are. The nation still remembers very vividly what happened on the 23rd of October 2023, which resulted in Mr. Chavinga sitting in the office where he's sitting as leader of opposition. But what is even very critical is that from the time Mr. Chavinga was made so-called leader of opposition, he has never provided leadership for the opposition in the Parliament. And this is what has contributed to the chaotic outing that we've been seeing in this Parliament. So our attempt was trying to realign Parliament so that we can continue to provide credible checks and balances. But lo and behold, you saw what the Speaker did to members of Parliament. Even when we went outside just to go and canvass and agree the position, and we said, out of respect, we're going to go back in the House so that we can continue the deliberations of the day. We walked into that House, the Speaker, still aching from the rage that he had against us, asked us all to leave for the day, and we left. It was very surprising, and to call what was happening that time as confusion is confusion itself, because the real confusion, if the public saw, is what happened when the UPND brought their newly elected member of Parliament for Lumezi to Parliament. they, in disregard of decorum, in disregard of parliamentary procedures, they came here clad in uniforms, UPND uniform, to present their candidate or to present their new member of parliament into the House. What was even more shocking was that the so-called leader of opposition, Mr. Chavinga, was found in the group of those people that brought their MP. How on earth can you have, in an opposition, in a country which is multi-party, in a country where the leader of opposition, who's supposed to be leading the opposition members of parliament, is going to patronize the political party that is in power, even giving the drummers money, you know, and when they are relating, and somebody wants to think that that is order, and that what the Patriotic Front is trying to do in the House is confusion. It tells a very big story about where we are sitting as a nation, as a multi-party state system. Our quest, even as we continue now, is to remind the presiding officer, the speakers themselves, that there's a provision of Article 74(2) in the Constitution that they need to comply with. We want to be civil, we want to be reasonable, we want to be leaders, and we want to demonstrate that we are fully compliant with the Constitution. We have made an earnest plea to the Speaker that insofar as we are concerned, Mr. Miles Sampa has now been elected by these members of Parliament of the Patriotic Front as leader of opposition. You know, we need to be able to know that the Speaker is going to read the Constitution correctly and comply with, with what is required of them to comply with. But see, this is what causes confusion in the House when people choose not to be consistent. Okay, at the time when Mr. Munduvire was removed as leader of the opposition, the same issue arose. The matter was in court. We even wrote to the Speaker ourselves and said, please, we have taken this matter to court. Do not change leaders of opposition. All members of parliament signed a petition to the Speaker asking her to maintain Mr. Munduvire as leader of opposition in parliament. The Speaker was, she did not agree. She was unrelentless. She decided she is going to change, even when the matter at that time was in court. This time, if you heard her response was that no, she can never deal with the matter of leader of opposition in parliament because the matter of Mr. Chavinga is in court. Now, this is very surprising because if the public has been following what is happening in court, Mr. Chavinga has been attempting to join the proceedings in which Mr. Sampa has been taken to court on leading the Patriotic Front. The High Court made a decision that Mr. Chavinga has not demonstrated any locus standi in the matter and was not joined to the proceedings. Just how this Speaker thinks that that matter is in court, for me, it beats the reasoning of every reasonable person. Because even if she wanted to be consistent, even when the matter is in court, like Mr. Munduvire's case was in court, she should have just complied with Article 74(2) of the Constitution. But see, we have said this, that from the time that the UPND came into power, the law and even the Constitution are not imperatives to this group. The law is a convenience. They will comply with it just when it suits them. If it does not suit them, they won't comply with it. They know exactly what is going to happen to this parliament if a leader of opposition who has approval of members of the opposition is allowed to sit in the seat of leader of opposition. It means we are going to be effective. It means we're going to provide proper and credible checks and balances as opposed to what is going on right now. That the leader of opposition, when you expect him to be leading a parliament, he is outside parliament. He comes in parliament, reads 1, 2 speeches, walks out of parliament without providing leadership in the House. So we think that we still have room to the Speaker, we still have room to the Deputy Speakers for us to ensure that we comply fully with what is provided for in the Constitution insofar as the leader of opposition in parliament is concerned. The case of having to kick us out of parliament when we simply went to canvass is again something that has caused us grave concern. Because if the country remembers, there were many, many times when the UPND, when they were in opposition, they were walking out of the House. Every time they were dissatisfied, they would walk out of the House, go and canvass and come back. Sometimes they would just go out of the House to protest the presence in the House of the Republican president at that time, Dr. Edgar Chagolungu. Whenever he came into the House, they walked out of that House. An issue was raised by the PF that time when they were in power, that they should be sanctioned for disrespecting the president. The Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Patrick McBean, rendered a ruling saying walking out of Parliament is a means of protest that members of Parliament are entitled to when they're dissatisfied with what is going on. This, if we are going to have a parliament that is consistent, this is what we expected the Speaker Nelly Muti to have done when we returned to parliament, because we simply had gone out to go and canvass and came back. But for her, because like I said, the law is a convenience in the UPND government, by extension the presiding officers, she found it fit to keep us out of the house, even when we demonstrated that we had just gone out to go and canvass. But this is how people who choose not to be consistent end up running down institutions such as what the National Assembly itself is. On the issue of Bill 7, you see, I made a statement at the time that the UPND suggested that they were going to amend the Constitution. I made a statement that the moral right to run and manage the affairs of a country rises and falls with the character of leadership that you provide. That is the time when they had not even, edged their signature on Bill 10. Just when it was suggested that the Constitution was going to be subject to some amendment, we had concern at that time because we knew that the fundamental facet of amending the Constitution had not been complied with by the UPND. We told them that if you saw what we had done with Bill 10, our consultation was so wide-ranging that all stakeholders had participated in that process, especially the UPND itself. The PF has not participated in the authoring of Bill 7. In fact, when they first approached us, we said the timeline is gone. The window for amending a constitution is gone. You will not have sufficient stakeholder consultation. But see, they kept saying, oh, the mama jealousy. You just don't want us to amend the Constitution. We reminded them that when you came into power, you never suggested to the nation that you're going to amend the Constitution. Where is the idea of amending the Constitution coming from? And why are you in such a hurry to amend this Constitution? But they basically felt that we were stepping on their way and they were going to do it anyway. They were relentless. Other stakeholders spoke to them and told them, you can't do it, there's just no time. They then started lining up stakeholders who supported their bid. And you started hearing compromise NGOs beginning to speak. Oh, no, we just need to do this. Even NGOCC was convinced at one time that this is a proper procedure for us to amend the Constitution. Okay? Unfortunately, when it became clear, when the matter was challenged in court by Honorable Munia Zulu and Celestine Mukandira versus the Attorney General, when it became clear that they had been caught wrong-footed, a decision was made, which again was unconstitutional. The president, I don't know from which powers under the Constitution, I don't know from, I've read Article 90, 91, 92, and 93. I don't see anywhere where the Constitution gives power to the president to guide the Minister of Finance, like Honorable Kafoya has said, to defer a bill which is on the floor of the House. Because in the legislative process, the president is a final mark. He's the one who will come and append his signature to this bill. So if this parliament was allowed to debate freely on Bill 7, we should never have heard of a suggestion that the president has guided the Minister of Justice to defer the bill. But even more importantly, the timing itself was very, very inconveniencing. Because the night we saw a write-up from State House that the minister has been guided to withdraw the bill, the following day, we had a very decisive decision by the Constitutional Court declaring the whole process which resulted in the enactment or in the drafting of Bill 10 to be null and void. It was unconstitutional. And the Constitutional Court, to the shock of the whole nation, cited various provisions of the Constitution that have been violated by the process that has been put in place by the European government in its attempt to amend this Constitution. We, as a Patriotic Front, feel extremely vindicated that the issues we'd raised about, the inappropriateness of the procedure that was going to be conceived by the UPND to amend this Constitution are the ones that came to the fore when the matter was being deliberated upon in the Constitutional Court and when the Constitutional Court made a decision. The majority decided everything that is happening with Bill 10 is unconstitutional. Now, I can forgive the president when he can suggest that this Bill 10 can be cleaned up by some kind of process, because now we are hearing a suggestion that there's going to be a technical committee that's going to be put in place to try and polish up the Constitution. No, sir. The Constitutional Court has told you that what you have put in place is a nullity. A nullity does not exist. You cannot bring it into existence by trying to polish it up. That's not the correct thing to do. You have fundamentally violated the Constitution. What you now need to do is to introduce, like the Constitutional Court guided, a completely different process which is much more stakeholder-based. And this answers to what the imperatives have always been when enacting the Constitution. We have had various constitutional review processes in this country. One thing that has been very consistent with all these is that we have deemed the process as people-owned. If you heard what the Patriotic Front did in 2011, they introduced a term, people-driven constitution, because the idea of writing a constitution is not supposed to be the preserve of politicians. I have said it before here, and I can repeat it, that a politician like we are now seeing is the most dangerous individual when it comes to constitutional making process, because they are politicians. The only thing they must provide to the process is political will, i.e. to assure the people that whatever you're going to put in to be included in the amendment, we are going to enact it when it comes to Parliament. That is the political will that politicians are supposed to provide to the Constitution. But when you allow politicians to drive the process, you get to a stage where they begin to argue with you. First, they begin to scream in your ears that, no, we're just looking for non-controversial provisions. We're going to amend them. Or, no, we're just going to, harvest low-hanging fruits. And we've said it many times here, there can never be low-hanging fruits. And if you see with what is happening now, NGOCC, the church, credible NGOs, they've come back and said, look, this thing looks evil. The whole of this draft looks evil. And can somebody now convince me that the non-controversial provisions? If I cite one example, where they tell you that, no, if Mr. Tsanga was elected under the Patriotic Front, and if he dies, we should avoid a by-election. Just go back and pick up UPND, who ranked number 2, and take them to Parliament and say this is a new member of Parliament. Where is democracy in those kind of processes? You even want to water down the qualification of a secretary to the cabinet and say, for you to be secretary to the cabinet, you can only be there if you were a civil servant for 5 years. You will be presiding over civil servants who have served. Just because somebody likes you in the political process, they pick you and take you in the highest office. That office is a very, very complex office. And God shows you examples. Look at how my brother Kango has been handling the issue of Edgar Lungu and the people. That tells you that you cannot just put an individual in that office and say this one is going to work. In fact, I must say here, without fear of contradiction, that Mr. Kango has tried very hard to make that office function. And the reason is simply because he is ably qualified, he has experience. Even in the midst of great frustrations, he's tried as much as possible to make sure that he functions in that office. But that should be an example to you Zambians who are following the debate on Bill 10, that somebody can come and convince you today that low-hanging fruits and non-controversial provisions include reducing the experience that a secretary to cabinet must have, and have anybody, for lack of a better term, any Jim and Jack, appointed and given a position of secretary to the cabinet. We need to become serious with how we want to handle, the affairs of our constitution. Coming back to the Attorney General, the Constitutional Court has made a determinate decision about this process. They have rubbished it, for lack of a better term. They have said it doesn't need to go on. They have advised government to abandon, not defer, abandon this process because it itself is unconstitutional. When you begin to hear the Attorney General begin suggesting that, no, we're just going to polish up Bill 10, it tells you that we have a problem of a capacity in that office. By extension, you see, this has made the Attorney General cause the President to breach the Constitution, because the constitutional obligation that the President carries on himself, provided for in Articles 90, Articles 91, 92, and 93 of the Constitution, are very onerous, that he needs an Attorney General of impeccable character to be advising them on what to do. If I was this Attorney General, I would simply have agreed and I would have respected the decision of the Constitutional Court, and I would have advised my cabinet and the President by extension to abandon the whole process and concentrate on several other areas in this country that are in need of attention. This country is in problems. If you have a country that cannot even agree on how to bury a former president, it tells you what kind of problems the country have. And for you to think that somebody can tell you can't do the Constitution, then you go back and say, oh, we're just going to polish it, it shows you lack of seriousness in leadership. Can we get serious? We need to start this journey from a standpoint of seriousness. The Constitution is not the only problem that in fact, we don't even have a problem with the Constitution. Believe it or not, we don't. Because Act number 2 of 2016 is a very effective statute. If we're a very serious nation, we can go to the next election using Act number 2. This is the same Constitution that put this president in power. This is the same constitution that put this government in power. Why are they having a problem with it now? Why do they want to shut the door to this constitution that helped them to get into power and redesign a constitution in such a way that it guarantees the retention of power in 2026? We cannot be doing this if we're a serious nation. So my advice to the Attorney General, you are the leader of the bar. Every lawyer looks up to you on how you are going to respond to a decision that is so categorical in the instruction it gives you and government on what to do. The easiest thing you can do is pack your muscle and go and sit with this cabinet and tell them, gentlemen, ladies, we've been guided. Madam Minister of Justice, the Constitutional Court has spoken. And you see, I spoke here once before. I said, we are so lucky in this country. We now have what is called a constitutional democracy. The only thing that we must do is to ensure that we pack people in the Constitutional Court who think, who can advise us, because all of us as a nation have resolved that those people, I think there are 13 or 11, are the only ones who are going to be telling us whether what we are doing is constitutional or not. And this time around, they have actually told us, or they've told this government, that your Bill 10 is unconstitutional. It violates the principle and the fundamental rules that are contained in the current constitution. So you cannot use it as a vehicle to amend this constitution. The advice to the Attorney General is to insist that you go and advise Cabinet to abandon this process and replace it with one that complies with the Constitution, but also one that takes on board all the stakeholders who are supposed to have a say in constitutional making. I'm so grateful for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Sanga, for that elaborate input that you have given to the media. And I think we are doing fine so far on a lot of these national issues. Allow me at this point to ask Honorable Gordon Muller to contribute what he has prepared for today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Honorable Student. And let me also write on the protocols already observed in recognizing the speakers for this afternoon's press address. I will limit my discussion this afternoon to the supplementary budget that was introduced to Parliament by the Minister of Finance, and we have been discussing that supplementary budget. You may know that this time the supplementary budget comes with an amount of 33.5 billion kwacha. That is extra money it's asking in order to enable government to implement the programs that they have lined up. Now, the 33.5 billion kwacha that the Minister has presented as supplementary budget, if you compare it with the substantive budget that we're implementing now, which is 217 billion, so that tells you that it's come with a supplementary budget standing at 15% of the substantive budget. Now, I think that, first of all, in this country, going by how this government has been handling the issue of coming with a supplementary budget, I think that there is need for coming up with a law that guides, limits how much that supplementary budget should be. Because going through this supplementary budget, I have seen a lot of questions bordering on the budget credibility and fiscal discipline. Because there are certain things that have been introduced in this budget, which then gives you a wonder. It takes you to wonder, where were the people when they were planning for the budget for 2025? Because they have introduced certain lines with colossal amounts, which generally, if people were serious at the time of preparing the main budget, should not be coming under these huge amounts in the supplementary budget. So I think that there may be need to come up with a law from Parliament, which will limit how much a supplementary budget should be in terms of percentage of the existing budget. Now, let me just show you certain examples of why I'm actually doubting the credibility and the fiscal discipline in this government. In the supplementary budget, there are certain lines that you worry and wonder why all of a sudden we are having, in some instances, requests for supplementary budgets which are far and beyond the figures that were approved in the original budget. The Ministry of Technology and Science have brought a supplementary budget request of 194 million kwacha for ICT infrastructure. The original line in that budget program is at 14 million kwacha. That is what we approved for this substantive budget. Now, 6 months down the line, the ministry comes and requests 494 million, 13 times more than what was originally approved. So where were the people? What has happened suddenly that you can require 13 times more than you had already planned? So that's why I'm saying credibility of this budget and fiscal discipline is a big problem. Because if you don't give a cap on how much supplementary budget should be, people will be coming up with such colossal sums of money. Where were they when the planning was happening? Not to have remembered that you need smart villages. I didn't even understand what smart villages the minister meant that will take this money to. Are we having internet connectivity in our villages now? Our schools running in the villages up to date with internet and ICT lessons? I really wonder. Now that explanation came up. If you look at the FISI program under Minister of Agriculture, the ministry is requesting an additional 5.8 billion kwacha, in addition to the 9.3, which is sitting in the substantive budget. This is more than 50%, almost 60% of the original budget. So the question you ask yourself is, what happened? Well, we have not had a drought to warrant extra investment in the FISI program. And if you listen to the explanation that we want to front load the e-vouchers, we are now paying this year for the agricultural inputs that were obtained last year. That raises a lot of queries. At the time of planning, this government knows, when we are preparing the national budget, the government knows how many people have been enrolled on the FISI program. And that will give you a calculation of how much you should provide. Now today, to be told that in fact the inputs that were obtained for the 2024-2025 agricultural season were not paid for, but they were being paid for in this year. And then we also want to pay everything in this year. Look, where have been the people? Because even this year, we know how many people are going to benefit under the FISI program. So to come and say we want 5.6 billion, 5.8 billion kwacha, it just shows you that there's lack of seriousness in terms of budgeting. And that is why the government is now abusing this idea of a supplementary budget, because they know that even if they relax in planning, they will still have an opportunity to come with a supplementary budget and put it at whatever amount, which really is not taking us anywhere as a government. My colleague, Honorable Kafuaya, talked about how this budget is going to be funded. Already, we are half year through the implementation of the original 2025 budget, and the minister comes to Parliament and says we have made savings of 10.9 billion kwacha. Who declares victory? Even in a soccer match, at halftime, you start saying we have won the match. Who declares victory halfway through the 90-minute soccer match? These savings of 10.9, which the minister has said we have made savings, already last week, or is it this week, from the Minister of Local Government, the PS was just releasing money and urging all local authorities to spend money within 48 hours or something. There is still program implementation going on across the country. How do you declare half the year that we have made these savings? All of a sudden, this government has become so efficient that they have actually carried out the programs or the procurements and implementation. They're even able to tell that this program we are done, we have saved this much. This program we have done, we have saved this much. How efficient this government has become all of a sudden. Where is the breakdown? Which program areas, which ministries, which heads of the budget have produced these savings? It just tells you that the calculation and the funding of all this the supplementary budget is shrouded in secrecy. The next thing I want to talk about in terms of funding this budget is the borrowing, which this government is going to borrow 14.5, net borrowing added to the domestic debt, 14.5 billion, and they have made a breakdown. 4 billion is going to come from the securities, interests, the bonds and treasury bills. 10+ billion kwacha is going to come from the commercial banks. Now, for me, the surprise, first of all, is that they are going to borrow at 13%, which is too high. Secondly, they are going to borrow US dollars locally. Now, this is the government which even has laws. We have laws here that traders cannot even be quoting prices in US dollars. Now, how does the government be the first one to even borrow locally in US dollars? Where will this money go? Are they borrowing US dollars so that they can pay US dollar debts, or is to fund the budget? The expenditure is in kwacha. And if you allow the government to, its own statutory instruments and laws not to transact locally in US dollars, but it is the first one now that is going to be borrowing locally in US dollars, what does that do? It puts a strain on the local currency. Suppliers and traders in the private sector borrow US dollars because they have invoices and debts to pay, or imports to pay for outside of this country. But this is not the case with the government. Why can't they borrow in kwacha? Because they are funding the budget which is based in kwacha, and the program they're implementing are in kwacha. So when we see the kwacha tumbling, when we see pressure on the kwacha, it is because of this kind of acts where the government itself is in the forefront, going to the local market but borrowing in dollars. Please stop it. Get your kwachas and fund the budget in kwacha. We are straining our local currency. Further, the borrowing this government is going to do. Now, I just want to link this to how we have lost leadership in the mining sector. We have seen gold reserves all over this country. The only thing I saw was to say we will now be sending military personnel to guard where we find these dollar reserves, these gold reserves. This is the same gold which has made countries transform. It's the same gold that has made rich men and women where in the jurisdictions where it has been found. But for us, instead of talking prosperity, instead of talking about how much the government has raised out of this, we are just talking about people dying, illegal miners being crushed, being hauled up and dying. We are losing lives instead of raising money. If the government was serious in terms of managing all these precious minerals, gold and others, we should not struggle to fund a supplementary budget of 33.5 billion. This is the money that we can raise locally if we taxed the mines properly, if we gathered and managed our gold reserves and other precious minerals properly. We should not struggle to raise this money. So basically, we have a problem in terms of fiscal discipline, and hence seeing all these supplementary budgets with very questionable figures. Like, people were not there when the main budget was being prepared, and they're just introduced midway, and they bring in lines that really do not make a lot of sense when you compare to the initial amounts that were budgeted for. So, of course, it's a supplementary budget that is very difficult to support, but it goes through simple majority in Parliament, and everyone there will just be saying, yeah, to pass it. But it is just encouraging fiscal indiscipline. It is not supporting budget credibility. And even the people that support the budget, external support, must look carefully how this process is being done. So I think with those words, I would say thank you very much, and I hand back to the moderator.
Thank you so much. We'll have Honorable Mundubire to speak last, then I'll try to sum up on take-home notes. Honorable Mundubire, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Mulenga Fube, Member of Parliament for Chilubi. Twatotera bafube omuposeshe kwa bantu kuchava kuma swamp MKA. I acknowledge the speakers that have spoken before me. These are members of Patriotic Front. Honorable Mtoto Kafuaya, Member of Parliament for Lunte. Honorable George Chisanga, Member for Lukasha, and Honorable Gordon Muira from Mufulira. And not forgetting the Fourth Estate. Yes, I think a lot has been said by my colleagues. I will comment on the fate of Bill 7. The starting point is that Bill 7 is dead. Bill 7 cannot be resurrected. It is dead. It died the moment the Constitutional Court pronounces judgment on Bill 7. So as we speak now, there is no legal document that is in existence called Bill 7. The process of coming up with that particular bill and the content and everything related and associated to it is now a nullity. So there is nothing called Bill 7. It's unfortunate that the Attorney General has deliberately decided to mislead those people that he's charged to advise and give them an impression that Bill 7 can be revived. It cannot be revived. The Constitutional Court was very clear in guiding the executive on how to proceed. Now, colleagues, if you remember, it was on this floor, it was here that we advised government. We advised government that constitution making under constitutional democracy and under new constitutionalism involved dialogue, transparency, accountability, legal process, among other things. There is a difference between a constitution and constitutionalism. A constitution is basically the black text. When you talk about constitutionalism, you look at the culture, the customs that surround the process of coming up with a constitution. And that's exactly what we're advising government. Government decided to ignore the advice and guidance that we gave on how to come up with a constitution amendment bill. The spirit of the Constitution is very clear. It talks about broad participation, public participation, among others, dialogue. The spirit of the Constitution is such that you must elicit trust. You must reach consensus so that all the stakeholders, majority stakeholders, should agree with you. So we went through on the floor of the House, we came here and advised government that one, when you want to come up with a constitution, there are basics. There are certain imperatives that you'll have to observe. For instance, to agree that you're going to amend the constitution, that agreement should come out of a stakeholders meeting. You must sit as stakeholders, as we're seated here, and agree that we're going to amend the constitution. So when that is done, we also have to go further and agree on the extent of amendment. How far do we want to go in amending the constitution? When you have agreed on the extent, then you come up with a design. How are we going to do what we have agreed? From that design will come the roadmap. So when the roadmap has been agreed upon, I want to show you how many steps the Minister of Justice skipped. It was after the design and you come up with a roadmap. Remember, the roadmap is also a product of consensus. You must agree with the stakeholders, this is the roadmap. Now, to ensure that the executive does not depart from that particular roadmap, that's when now stakeholders demand that you legislate the process. Meaning the roadmap now comes to Parliament after the ministerial statement. It now comes in form of a bill. It's debated on the floor of the House and enacted as law. That way, all the stakeholders remain confident that you follow. All these steps were skipped by the UPND. We are therefore not surprised that the Concord found this particular process and that particular bill to be unconstitutional and indeed a nullity. So way forward, our advice to government is that first of all, they must assess the time that is remaining in between now and the next election. And number two, they should facilitate stakeholders' meetings before they even talk about a team of experts. Because if they get a team of experts, it means that team of experts will be looking at Bill 7. Like we said, Bill 7 is dead. So those experts can't come in now because they'll be looking at a bill that is dead. So the starting point is to get stakeholders together, and that stakeholders meeting can be facilitated by government, but chaired by the church or maybe the Law Association of Zambia. It's from that meeting now that all other agreements can be made. We can't prescribe, not even here at this press briefing. All we can recommend is that a stakeholders meeting be called So that stakeholders look at the time that is remaining, the work that has to be done, and if at all it's feasible that a consultative constitution-making process can be commenced now and concluded before the next election. It's that consultative meeting that will come with that conclusion. So, Attorney General, as has been guided by my colleagues, we want to call upon you to give sound advice to the executive. I know that it may not be easy, given the frustrations, sometimes that people are getting, from the executive. Even professionals now are scared to give proper advice. But as a trained lawyer myself, I think we are trained to deal with very difficult situations. The Attorney General, as head of the Zambian Bar, I think has enough experience and can really pack his muscle and be able to face the executive and just tell them the truth on the import of the judgment that has come from the Constitutional Court. You can't continue playing ping pong, even when the judgment is clear. Even lay people are reading that judgment and they can interpret it. So when we hear the Attorney General saying it's an act of lawlessness for people to talk about abandoning Bill 7. No. What is lawlessness is Attorney General and his people advising others that Bill 7 can be revived. That is what is lawlessness, not those that are talking about Bill 7 to be a dead bill at that. Yeah, so to my brother, President Hakainde Hichilema, I remember that in the past, when he was condemning Bill 10, he made reference to State Counsel John Sangwa. He said, look, constitutional lawyer John Sangwa has spoken against Bill 10. Why don't you abandon it? He referred to Chapter 1 Foundation. He referred to the churches, among others. And all these people that I've mentioned have condemned Bill 7, or indeed the attempt to amend the Constitution through Constitution Amendment Bill number 7. So President Hakainde Hichilema, it's the same people that you referred to as authorities previously, and I think that you can listen to their advice now. These are Zambians, men and women, that have stood firm on the side of the people to advise on constitutional matters. So I want to believe that even President Hakainde Hichilema, who previously relied on these experts to guide on constitution making, can still rely on them. I want to draw a distinction because when you talk about consultation, even before we bring in the Concord judgment, when the Minister of Justice was going around the country to make consultations, there was already a bill which was gazetted. And she called whatever she was doing consultation. Now the question was, what was the product going to be out of those consultations? For instance, the chiefs in Wapula made their submissions. The Minister of Wapula asked the minister, why haven't you included those submissions that were given by the chiefs in this particular? There was some misunderstanding of the process. And I think that the minister did not understand what consultations mean when it comes to constitution making. The consultations that you make under this process are consultations before you come up with the bill itself. Even the consultations referred to under Article 79 are not consultations after the bill has been assembled. These are consultations